In the first millennium BC, the area of present-day Bosnia was inhabited by numerous Illyrian tribes, who are considered the first historically documented inhabitants of this region. These tribes were not a unified political or cultural entity, but many small groups with their own leaders, dialects, and ways of life. They lived in fortified settlements, often built on hills or in inaccessible terrain to protect them from enemies, and their society was strongly characterized by a tribal structure, with the art of war, trade, and animal husbandry playing a central role in daily life. Archaeological finds such as tools, weapons, jewelry, and burial sites testify to an independent and diverse culture that developed over centuries. The Illyrian practice of building large burial mounds, known as tumuli, where important personalities were buried, is particularly well known. These mounds have survived in parts of Bosnia and provide an insight into the religious beliefs and social structures of these early societies. Illyrian tribes were in frequent contact with neighboring peoples, especially the Greeks, who had colonies along the Adriatic coast. Over time, these contacts brought the region further into the sphere of influence of the ancient world and eventually led to its integration into larger political structures. However, the Illyrian identity remained intact for a long time until it was gradually displaced by Roman expansion. The Illyrian tribes thus left the earliest known cultural traces on the territory of Bosnia and constituted the first significant period in the history of this country. Roman rule. From the 1st century AD, the area of present-day Bosnia became an integral part of the Roman Empire, initially as part of the province of Illyria, and later as part of other administrative regions such as Dalmatia and Pannonia. This unification was an important turning point in the history of the region, as it brought not only military occupation, but above all sweeping political, economic, and cultural changes. The conquest took place after long and bloody battles, including a major uprising of the Illyrian tribes between 7 to 9 AD, which was violently suppressed by Rome, and only after this conflict was Roman rule secured. The Romans then began to expand the infrastructure. They built fortified military camps known as fortresses to secure their control and constructed an extensive network of roads linking important cities, built of stone slabs, some of which remain intact to this day. Roman roads not only facilitated the movement of troops, but also encouraged trade and communication. Towns such as Bistuanova, near present-day Seneca, Domavia, near present-day Srebrenica, and other small settlements became local administrative and commercial centers, and the Roman presence also brought a new economic impetus. The region was rich in natural resources, especially silver, lead, and iron, which led to extensive use by Roman mining companies. In Domavia, for example, a large mining center was established along with an administration and temples dedicated to the Roman state cult, and these economic activities led to increased urbanization and the emergence of a wealthy upper class that adopted the Roman way of life. Alongside economic and military structures, Roman culture spread. Latin became the official language, and many local elites began to adopt Roman names, wear Roman clothes, and become involved in Roman administration, and public buildings such as tombs, amphitheaters, and temples were built where people's daily lives took place. The Roman legal system was also introduced, which led to a stronger social order. From the 3rd century onwards, Christianity finally spread throughout the region, initially secretly, but later openly tolerated, and the first congregations were established, with church buildings and cemeteries built to witness to the new faith. Christianity quickly gained adherents, especially in the urban centers. This development laid the foundations for the later religious character of Bosnia, Slavic settlement. In the centuries following the fall of Roman rule, a shift began in the ethnic and cultural makeup of the region that is today Bosnia. Particularly in the 6th and 7th centuries, Slavic peoples settled in the region. This process did not happen suddenly, but over a long period of time, and was closely linked to the political and military turmoil in the eastern Mediterranean at the time. The Slavs originally came from areas east of the Carpathians and moved into the Balkans in waves, colonizing uninhabited areas as well as penetrating existing communities, and the Slavic influx coincided with the weakening of the Byzantine Empire, which took control of much of the Balkans after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Repeated attacks by Avars, Goths, and other groups had left many Roman cities uninhabited or destroyed, creating space for new settlers. The Slavs took advantage of this opportunity to begin farming, settling in the river valleys, and creating the first village structures. Their society was initially strongly organized along tribal lines and had a rather loose political structure, characterized mainly by family ties and local leaders. Slavic colonization had far-reaching effects on the cultural and linguistic identity of the region. The previously dominant Latin language and Roman culture were gradually replaced or mixed with Slavic elements, and the new settlers brought with them their own customs, religious beliefs, and language, which were then blended with local traditions. Farming lifestyles adapted to the geographical conditions of the country, from fertile river valleys to inland mountainous regions, were particularly influential. Over time, the first political units emerged among the Slavic peoples, initially small and localized, but which over the centuries developed into the first principalities. Christianity, widespread in the Roman Empire, also found new ground among the Slavs, with both Eastern Orthodox and Western Catholic influences, something that would later become of great importance for Bosnia. Slavic settlement laid the foundations for Bosnia's later ethnic and cultural identity, and its language, customs, social organization, and worldview were henceforth significantly influenced by Slavic traditions. Many of the place names used in Bosnia and Herzegovina today are also of Slavic origin. This movement of migration and settlement was thus one of the most formative in the early history of the region, a movement that permanently changed the face of Bosnia and is still recognized today. The first principalities. In the 9th century, as the Slavic peoples who had migrated to the Balkans in previous centuries developed increasingly stable political structures, the first Slavic principalities began to form in the area that is today Bosnia. This period was characterized by the emergence of smaller, often autonomous principalities, influenced both by local rulers and overarching empires. A particularly important principality of this early period was Banat Bosna, located in present-day Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is considered one of the first political entities in the region. Banat Bosna was a smaller Slavic principality spread in the heart of the Balkans. Strongly influenced by Slavic traditions and organization, society was structured by tribal leadership and local dynasties. These principalities, which included Banat Bosnia, were often disputed territories between various great powers and neighboring peoples, including the Byzantine Empire, the Franks, and later the Kingdom of Hungary, and the geopolitical position of these early principalities made them an important strategic point, as they provided the connection between the Western and Eastern worlds and access to important trade routes. The political structure of the first principalities was strongly characterized by Slavic tribal society, where local princes or banu, i.e., principality rulers, ruled the country. These early princes had not only political power, but also religious and social importance, and in a society still largely based on oral tradition and tribal rights, princes were also recognized as judges and high legislators. However, their power was often challenged by neighboring kingdoms, which meant that Banat Bosnia and other early Slavic principalities often went back and forth between different rulers. During this early period, Banat Bosnia was closely associated with the development of Christianity in the Balkan Peninsula, and although Banat Bosnia was largely subordinate to the Byzantine Empire during this period, local princes acting as part of the Byzantine administration gradually began to develop their own regional identities. These religious and cultural changes formed the basis for the later development of Bosnian society, as the Slavic population of Banat Bosnia increasingly came into contact with the Christian religion. The presence of Christianity strengthened the connection with the Eastern Byzantine world, which would later lead to conflict with Western Catholic Europe, and it is important to emphasize that Banat Bosnia and other early Slavic principalities were still far from the later centralized administration that would characterize medieval Bosnia. Instead, these early principalities were characterized by numerous local units and diverse cultures, resulting in a mosaic of different political, social, and religious structures. This diversity persisted throughout the Middle Ages and shaped the development of Bosnian identity in the following centuries. Over time, the political importance of Banat Bosnia and other Slavic principalities grew, and the region in particular became an important part of early Bosnian history. The history of these early principalities is marked by numerous political and cultural upheavals associated with changing political alliances and the rise and fall of neighboring empires. With its central location in the Balkans, Banat Bosnia played a key role in the first centuries after Slavic settlement, both as a regional power center and as a site of cultural and religious change, and the emergence of Banat Bosnia and other early Slavic principalities during this period laid the foundation for the later development of the Kingdom of Bosnia in the Middle Ages. These early political entities were in many ways the precursors of medieval Bosnian rule and played a decisive role in shaping the political and cultural landscape that characterized Bosnia for centuries to come. They laid the foundations for the complex political structures that would later characterize Bosnia and contributed to the emergence of a unique Bosnian identity that lasted until modern times. In the 14th century, Bosnia underwent significant political and cultural change as it emerged as an independent kingdom under the Kotromanić dynasty. This development marked a turning point in the history of the region as Bosnia transformed from a loose principality into a sovereign and highly organized state. The origin of the Kotromanić dynasty began in 1287 when Stephen Kotromanić seized power in Bosnia. He was the first ruler of this dynasty and played a central role in consolidating Bosnia's independence and expanding its territory. Stephen Kotromanić began to strengthen the country both politically and militarily, expanding the Principality of Bosnia through skillful diplomacy and military conquests. He not only maintained control over important territories in the center of the country, but also managed to expand the borders and increase Bosnia's influence in the region. This helped establish Bosnia as a politically independent and influential entity in the southeastern European world, and throughout the 14th century, Bosnia continued to rise as a regional power under the Kotromanić dynasty. Bosnia experienced its greatest territorial expansion, especially during the reign of King Tvrtko I, who ascended the throne in 1377. Tvrtko Bjarn was not only crowned King of Bosnia, but also proclaimed himself King of Serbia and ruled vast territories in the Western Balkans, including parts of present-day Croatia and Montenegro. This expansion strengthened Bosnia as an influential power in southeastern Europe and led to the development of the kingdom's culture and economy. Tvrtko Bjarn's expansionist policy was characterized by military successes, and he led many campaigns against neighboring states and managed to turn Bosnia into a major regional power. He managed to expand his influence by conquering regions such as Bosnia, Dalmatia, and especially part of the coastal areas, while at the same time gaining control over important trade routes. These military successes contributed to Bosnia being seen as a prosperous and politically stable kingdom in the 14th century. Despite the achievements of the Kotromanić dynasty, Bosnia and the Kingdom of Bosnia faced increasing threats. In the late 14th century, the power of the Ottoman Empire increased, and the Ottomans began to gain a foothold in the Western Balkans. The expansion of the Ottoman Empire posed a great challenge for Bosnia, as the Ottomans exerted increasing pressure on the kingdoms in the region. The decline of the Kingdom of Bosnia began in the 15th century. In the last years of Tvrtko Dier's reign and after his death in 1391, internal tensions and power struggles among local nobles began to weaken the kingdom. This instability led to Bosnia becoming vulnerable to external aggression over the following decades. A decisive turning point in Bosnian history began in 1463, when the Ottoman Empire conquered the Kingdom of Bosnia. Ottoman expansion in the Balkans continued throughout the 15th century, and Bosnia was one of the last independent kingdoms in the region to resist the Ottomans. And after a long military conflict, the kingdom finally came under the control of the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, also known as Mehmed the Conqueror, who had previously conquered Constantinople. The Ottoman conquest of Bosnia was a turning point for the country. Bosnia's last king, Stjepan Tomašević, was captured and eventually executed after the siege of Sarajevo, marking the end of the Bosnian monarchy. Bosnia was then integrated into the Ottoman Empire and remained part of this great empire for almost 4 centuries. This conquest was not only a political, but also a cultural and social upheaval for the region. Under Ottoman rule, Bosnia underwent a series of changes that had a lasting impact on the country. The Ottomans introduced their administrative structure and the Islamic legal system, which led to a far-reaching transformation in society. The country was divided into various administrative units called sanjaks, and the Ottoman Empire established itself as a new political and cultural power in the region. Under Ottoman rule, the country became increasingly Islamized, and the Ottomans encouraged the spread of Islam, which led many Bosnians to convert to Islam. This religious change characterized Bosnia's culture and daily life in the following centuries. Another feature of Ottoman rule was the introduction of the feudal system, in which most of the land passed into the hands of Ottoman nobles, and the life of the rural population was often characterized by heavy taxes and a hierarchical social structure. However, it also had positive effects, especially in urban centers. Art, architecture, and commerce flourished in many cities, such as Sarajevo, and Bosnia benefited from the Ottoman infrastructure and trade routes that ran throughout the empire. In the 19th century, with the gradual disintegration of the Ottoman Empire and changing geopolitical conditions, the major European powers began to expand their spheres of influence in southeastern Europe. Bosnia, which had remained under Ottoman control since its conquest by the Ottoman Empire in 1463, came under increasing pressure, and by this time nationalism in the Balkan states had also intensified, and Bosnia began to turn against centuries of foreign rule. In 1878, following the Congress of Berlin, Bosnia officially came under the control of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Although the region officially remained part of the Ottoman Empire, Austria-Hungary took over the administration of Bosnia. This political change further shifted the balance of power and paved the way for further development of the region in the decades to come. Ottoman rule in Bosnia left lasting traces, especially in the fields of architecture, religion, and culture. Today, many of the historic mosques, bazaars, and other Ottoman structures can still be found in Bosnia and are considered important cultural legacies of the Ottoman Empire. Religious diversity. During nearly 4 centuries of Ottoman rule in Bosnia, the country became a center of religious diversity. The Ottomans' introduction to Islam had a profound impact on the religious structure of the region. At the beginning of Ottoman rule in 1463, Bosnia had a majority Christian population belonging to Catholic and Orthodox denominations, but over time, especially in the 16th and 17th centuries, more and more Bosnians converted to Islam, fundamentally changing the religious structure of the country, and the Ottoman administration actively supported the spread of Islam by offering various incentives for conversion. People who converted to Islam were often exempted from high taxes and given access to some social rights. As a result, many peasants and urban workers who suffered from the high taxes of the Christian Church converted to Islam in order to benefit from tax and social privileges, especially in rural areas where this decision was often linked to practical considerations. However, Christian as well as Islamic religions persisted in the country. The Catholic Church retained its followers mostly in the western parts of Bosnia, while the Orthodox Church found its followers mostly in eastern Bosnia. Religious differences between Christian groups and Muslims often led to a complex and often conflict-laden social structure, as religious identity represented not only a spiritual but also a cultural and political aspect. Another important aspect was that Bosnia enjoyed a relatively high level of religious tolerance under the Ottoman Empire. Although Islam was the predominant religion, the Ottomans practiced a policy of communal dissolution in their provinces, which allowed Christian and Jewish minorities to retain their religion and cultural traditions to a large extent. This practice led to Bosnia having an unusually wide range of religious beliefs, resulting in a religious cohesion not seen in many parts of the Balkans at the time. The Ottoman period left in Bosnia not only a religious diversity, but also an architectural and cultural imprint. Mosques, bridges, bazaars, and other structures from this period are still an important part of Bosnia's heritage today and reflect the Islamic influence, but Catholic churches, Orthodox monasteries, and synagogues also remain an important part of the cultural heritage, making Bosnia a fascinating melting pot of religious diversity. Following the end of Ottoman rule in the late 19th century and during the political turmoil that followed, especially after the Second World War, Bosnia's religious diversity remained an important feature of the country. And this religious pluralism has created periods of both conflict and peace in Bosnian history and remains an important part of national identity. Following the Congress of Berlin in 1878, Austria-Hungary took over the administration of Bosnia, which marked an important turning point in the country's history. The Congress brought together the great powers of Europe to resolve the political and territorial problems that had arisen in the Balkans after the Ottoman-Russian War of 1867-1868. Although Bosnia officially remained part of the Ottoman Empire, Austria-Hungary was authorized to administer and militarily occupy the country in order to protect the interests of the Habsburg Empire in southeastern Europe, which wanted to have influence in this strategically important region. Under Austro-Hungarian rule, Bosnia was reorganized not only politically, but also economically and socially. The Habsburgs pursued a policy aimed at both modernization and securing their own power, and began to implement extensive infrastructure projects, such as the expansion of railway lines, roads, and telecommunication systems. These measures stimulated economic development, facilitated trade, and integrated Bosnia more closely into the Austro-Hungarian Empire. However, the economic advantages were often one-sided and mainly benefited Austro-Hungarian interests, and the Bosnian people were not always in favor of Austro-Hungarian rule. Many Bosnians perceived the new rule as foreign domination and rejected the increasing control of the Austro-Hungarian administration. Political and social changes met with resistance, especially in rural areas where the Ottomans had traditionally retained control. And although the Austrian administration tried to involve the local elite in its projects, the relationship between Bosniaks and the new administration remained strained. In particular, the Muslim population, which had enjoyed relatively high privileges under Ottoman rule, felt oppressed and disadvantaged by the Habsburgs. A striking step in the history of Bosnia under Austro-Hungarian control was the formal annexation in 1908. Until then, Austria-Hungary had occupied Bosnia as a country ruled by the Ottomans. That year, however, the formal annexation took place, declaring Bosnia and Herzegovina a full-fledged part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. This annexation, considered illegitimate by the great powers, notably the Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Serbia, led to increased tension and resistance in Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as internationally. Under Austro-Hungarian rule, Bosnia was not only modernized infrastructurally, but also culturally and politically. Austrian rule sought to establish a centralized administration that exercised uniform control over the country, and a new policy of school education was introduced that gave Bosnian citizens, especially the Muslim population, access to Western-oriented education, which in the long run led to the Westernization of society. At the same time, however, there was constant resistance from the Serb and Croat populations, who pursued their own national aspirations. In sum, Austro-Hungarian rule plunged Bosnia into a new geopolitical reality that brought both progress and conflict. The annexation of Bosnia in 1908 was a turning point that shaped the political future of the country and exacerbated tensions between various ethnic groups and imperial powers. On June 28, 1914, the assassination of the heir to the Austrian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Este, and his wife Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, in the Bosnian capital Sarajevo, by Gavrilo Princip, a member of the nationalist group Black Hand, led to the Sarajevo assassination, a historic event that is considered the immediate trigger of the First World War. The murder of the heir to the throne was not only a personal loss for the Austrian imperial family, but also had far-reaching political consequences that destabilized Europe and led to one of the most devastating conflicts in history. Franz Ferdinand was the heir to the Austrian throne at the time and was seen as a relatively progressive and reform-minded personality, and his planned project, mainly aimed at the autonomy of various ethnic groups in the Danube monarchy, was not well received by many circles of the Austrian Empire, as it challenged the existing order. The assassination of the heir to the throne in Sarajevo was the result of long-standing tensions between various nationalist movements in the Balkans and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In Bosnia-Herzegovina, officially under Austro-Hungarian rule since 1908, there was strong discontent, especially among the Serbian population, which was oppressed by the imperial power, and the assassination was organized by Serbian nationalist circles who wanted Bosnian independence and unification with Serbia. The assassin, Gavrilo Princip, was a 19-year-old Bosnian of Serbian origin and a member of the Black Hand, a secret organization that aimed to destabilize the Habsburg Empire through violence and to realize the pan-Serbian dream of a great Serbian nation. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie was a direct challenge to Austro-Hungarian rule and contributed to the escalation of tensions in Europe. Austria-Hungary's reaction to the assassination was swift and decisive. They sought the support of their main ally, Germany, to legitimize eventual military action against Serbia. On July 23, 1914, Austria-Hungary-Serbia issued an ultimatum with so many demands that it was almost impossible to accept. When Serbia refused to accept all the demands, Austria-Hungary-Serbia declared war on July 28, 1914, setting off a chain reaction in which the network of alliances and mutual obligations between the European powers came into play. Serbia was supported by Russia, which brought Germany and the German Empire into the conflict. The declaration of war led to a dramatic upheaval that plunged Europe and later the world into a long and destructive conflict. It claimed millions of lives and reorganized the political map of Europe. The Sarajevo assassination was therefore not only the murder of an heir to the throne, but also a key moment that exposed existing tensions and fragile political alliances in Europe. A tragic event that marked the beginning of the First World War and shaped the development of world history throughout the entire 20th century. Part of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, following the end of the First World War in 1918, Bosnia underwent a fundamental political transformation with the collapse of the Danube monarchy and the end of Austro-Hungarian rule. Bosnia became part of the newly formed Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, which later became the Kingdom of Yugoslavia in 1929. This reorganization was a direct consequence of the collapse of the Habsburg monarchy and the creation of a new state that would unite all South Slavic peoples to overcome the effects of war and political instability. The new Yugoslav monarchy was led by King Peter I, the first head of state of the new kingdom, who aimed to unite the various ethnic groups in the Balkans, mainly Serbs, Croats, Slovenes, Bosniaks, and others, under a centralized administration to promote stability and cooperation. However, ethnic tensions between different ethnic groups remained high, and there were difficulties in creating a functional and stable political entity from the very beginning. Previously under Austro-Hungarian control, Bosnia was now part of a larger South Slavic state, but its political structure could not fully accommodate the different national identities and interests of the various regions and ethnic groups, and Bosniaks, especially the majority Muslim Bosniaks, found themselves in an increasingly complex situation, living in a state dominated by Serb and Croat majorities. Tensions arose as many Bosniaks rejected the idea of living in a state where their Serb or Croat identity was at the forefront. In 1929, under the reign of King Alexander III, the Kingdom of Yugoslavia was transformed into a centralized monarchy under a strong, centralized government that sought to minimize ethnic differences through strict control and nationalist ideologies. And the name of the new Kingdom of Yugoslavia emphasized the unification of the South Slavic peoples, with the term Yugoslavs serving as a designation for the ethnic unity of all South Slavs. This reorganization of the political landscape led to further tensions and resistance among the various ethnic groups, as many of them perceived the idea of unity under a centralized monarchy as a threat to their ethnic identity and autonomy. Despite these tensions, Bosnia, considered one of the central regions of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia in this new structure, was of exceptional geopolitical and economic importance, and was a vital part of the Yugoslav state, both economically and due to its strategic location in the Balkans. However, political tensions and unresolved ethnic conflicts led to further resentments that later resulted in the Yugoslav Wars in the 1990s. Overall, the integration of Bosnia into the Kingdom of Yugoslavia after the First World War was a defining moment in the history of the region and marked the beginning of a new era characterized by political, ethnic, and religious challenges. The fragmentation and complexity of the South Slavic identity was never fully overcome, which significantly influenced the subsequent history of Yugoslavia and the events leading to the dissolution of the state. During the Second World War, Bosnia was a major site of conflict between various warring factions, which brought a heavy political and social burden to the region. Following the invasion of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia by the Axis powers led by Nazi Germany in 1939, Bosnia, like the rest of the country, was integrated into the fascist puppet regime of the independent Croatian state, NDH. This regime was established under the control of the Ustasa government, an ultra-nationalist Croatian fascist movement. Ustasa was known for its brutal measures, especially against Serbs, Jews, and Roma, who were persecuted in Bosnia and other parts of the new state, and as German troops occupied the country, various resistance groups began to fight against the occupation and the Ustasa regime. The most important groups were the Yugoslav partisans led by Josip Broz Tito and the Serbian monarchist resistance movement, the Chetniks. Both groups fought against Ustasa and the German occupiers, but pursued different ideological goals and often fought each other. The partisans, supported by the Communist Party of Yugoslavia, focused on Bosnia and other rural areas where they found broad support among the population. Tito, the leader of the partisan movement, campaigned for a socialist Yugoslavia and sought to overcome ethnic tensions in the country, and under their leadership Bosnia became one of the main centers of the partisan movement, and the region was the scene of numerous battles against both the German occupiers and the Ustasa and Chetniks. The Ustasa and their more brutal actions, especially their ethnic cleansing and persecution of Serbs, Roma, and Jews, led to extreme tensions in Bosnia. Even many Bosnians who did not want to join Ustasa found themselves in a brutal dilemma between the various warring factions. Many Bosnians, both Muslim and other ethnic groups, joined the partisans or Chetniks, while others tried to remain neutral or resist the violence. Ustasa's treatment of the Serb population in Bosnia was particularly brutal. The Catholic Ustasa government sought to rid Bosnia of the Serb and Orthodox presence in Bafia, and to make the Muslim population its ally. This strategy led to further ethnic tension and conflict in the region. In addition to the battles against the occupying forces and Ustasa, there were also internal conflicts within the partisan movement as some factions of the resistance pursued their own political goals, making it difficult to unite among different ethnic and political currents. But thanks to the support of the population and their military strength, the partisans eventually managed to take control of Bosnia and liberate most of the territory from the occupying forces. At the end of the Second World War, following the defeat of the Axis powers and the withdrawal of German troops from Yugoslavia, Tito and the Communist Party took control of the country. The war in Bosnia left deep scars, both in terms of physical destruction and the ethnic and political tensions that continue to characterize the region, making the Second World War in Bosnia a conflict not only characterized by military clashes and atrocities, but also by a very complex political and ethnic dimension. Various resistance groups pursued different goals, leading to further divisions and violence. These tensions would continue to influence the post-war period and the subsequent course of Yugoslav history. Following the end of the Second World War and the defeat of the Axis powers, Bosnia and Herzegovina became part of the newly established Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia in 1945. This new socialist Yugoslavia, led by Josip Broz Tito, aimed for a federal structure in which different ethnic groups within the country would have a certain degree of autonomy. Bosnia and Herzegovina was included in the new federation as one of the 6 constituent republics, forming the 6th Constituent Republic, along with Croatia, Serbia, Slovenia, Montenegro, and Macedonia. The integration of Bosnia and Herzegovina into Yugoslavia after the war was an important part of efforts to stabilize the country politically and unite the various ethnic groups in a federal system. Bosnia was ethnically diverse at the time, with a mixture of Bosniaks, Muslim Bosniaks, mostly Catholic Croats, and mostly Orthodox Serbs. Tito pursued a policy of brotherhood and unity to overcome these ethnic differences and create a strong, united socialist society, and the Communist Party, led by Tito and his supporters, carried out many reforms to integrate Bosnia into socialist Yugoslavia. Under the socialist government, Bosnia underwent a series of industrialization and modernization processes that stimulated economic growth. Cities such as Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina, experienced an economic boom, and the region benefited from state support and investment in the expansion of infrastructure, industry, and educational institutions. The socialist government also placed great emphasis on promoting inter-ethnic unity. The idea of creating a Yugoslav identity that transcended ethnic affiliations meant that Bosnia and Herzegovina, with its mixed ethnic composition, played a special role in this regard, as Bosnia and Herzegovina was seen as a melting pot of the different ethnic groups in Yugoslavia. This approach was propagated by the government as a model for the whole state. Despite these efforts, there have always been tensions between the different ethnic groups in Bosnia, which were often suppressed by the communist government. In the period after the Second World War, Bosnia and Herzegovina's political and cultural identity was strengthened through social and economic integration into the Yugoslav Federation, but ethnic differences persisted and were not completely overcome. Moreover, political control in Yugoslavia was highly centralized, which in some cases led to dissatisfaction and frustration among various ethnic groups. In the following decades, Bosnia and Herzegovina became a relatively stable and flourishing constituent republic within Yugoslavia, and under the leadership of Titus and his successors, the country experienced a period of peace and growth that strengthened the country and Bosnia economically. However, the political situation has always been characterized by ethnic tensions, even though they were largely suppressed during the socialist period. State control over the media and political institutions played an important role in this, as the government maintained control over national discourses, and while Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs in Bosnia and Herzegovina enjoyed a certain degree of political and cultural freedom during this period, ethnic tensions and differences in religious identities remained a sensitive issue. The socialist government tried to overcome these tensions by emphasizing Yugoslav identity and socialist solidarity, which was partially successful but not permanently stabilized. However, after Tito's death in 1980, Bosnia's socialist character changed. Dissatisfaction with the political and economic system increased, and political differences between various ethnic groups came to the fore. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, national and ethnic tensions began to escalate again, ultimately leading to the events of the 1990s. In 1992, Bosnia and Herzegovina declared independence from Yugoslavia, following a referendum, a decisive moment in the history of the region, and the declaration of independence was the result of a long political process, reflecting both internal and external tensions. Prior to this, the political situation in Yugoslavia had become increasingly tense. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, national and ethnic conflicts, fueled by the disintegration of the socialist state, surfaced, and a referendum in February 1992 was supported by the vast majority of Bosnians, but not by all ethnic groups in the country. The Serb population in Bosnia was particularly opposed to independence, as many Serbs in Bosnia were closely tied to Serbia and opposed to the loss of federal allegiance to Yugoslavia. Bosnian Muslims and Croats, on the other hand, were in favor of full independence and their own nation-state, and the result of the referendum was clear. More than two-thirds of the voters voted in favor of independence. This was a historic step that changed the political landscape in the Balkans forever, but it immediately led to serious conflict as the Declaration of Independence was not recognized by Serbia and the Serb minority in Bosnia. Tensions escalated in the following months, and war broke out in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The independence of Bosnia and Herzegovina was a turning point in the history of the Balkans, as it marked the end of the former Yugoslavia and led to one of the bloodiest conflicts in Europe since the Second World War. Lasting until 1995, the war claimed thousands of lives and caused immeasurable suffering. The Bosnian War. The Bosnian War, which lasted from 1992 to 1995, was a brutal and destructive conflict triggered by ethnic tensions between Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs. The war began soon after Bosnia and Herzegovina declared independence in 1992, when Serbia and the Serb minority in Bosnia did not recognize the independence of the new state and sought to control Bosnian territory. At the beginning of the conflict, Bosnian Serbs, supported by the forces of Serbia and Montenegro, fought against Bosnian Muslims, Bosniaks, and Croats, many of whom were represented in the pro-independence movement, and the war was characterized by brutal ethnic cleansing, sieges, and brutal fighting, with civilians targeted. The war turned into a proxy war, with various external powers involved in the conflict. An important part of the war was the siege of cities such as Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which was besieged and bombed by Serb forces for years. Sarajevo suffered one of the longest sieges in modern warfare, and the population lived in extreme conditions. Destructive war crimes were also committed in other cities, notably Srebrenica. The worst of these crimes was the Srebrenica massacre in 1995, in which more than 8,000 Bosnian men and boys were killed by Serb troops. This massacre has been recognized as genocide by the United Nations and remains one of the worst crimes in recent history. In addition to ethnic conflicts, the Bosnian War was also a war of ideological and religious divisions. Bosniaks, who are mostly Muslim, fought for an independent Bosnia. Croats largely supported an independent Croatia, while Serbian troops wanted to integrate Bosnian territory into the larger Serbia. Thousands of people were displaced during the war, and there were widespread incidents of rape, torture, and murder. The conflict lasted for years, causing a massive humanitarian crisis, and the war ended in 1995 with the Dayton Agreement, brokered by the international community. This agreement laid the foundation for peace and created a complex political structure in which Bosnia and Herzegovina is governed as a unified state with three ethnic entities: one Bosniak, one Croat, and one Serb. The Dayton Agreement ended the conflict, but the consequences of the war are still felt today, with nearly 100,000 people killed and millions displaced. Ethnic tensions remain an unresolved issue in post-war Bosnia and Herzegovina as they continue to affect political life and social integration. The Bosnian War remains a painful part of the country's history, and the wounds of the past will haunt the country for a long time to come. The Srebrenica massacre, which took place in July 1995 during the Bosnian War, is considered one of the worst war crimes committed in Europe since the Second World War. Srebrenica, a town in eastern Bosnia and Herzegovina, was officially designated by the United Nations as a safe haven for Bosnian Muslim Bosniaks to seek refuge from the conflict. However, despite these international assurances, the town was overrun by Bosnian Serb troops under the command of General Ratko Mladic, and on July 17, 1995, after Serb troops captured the town, Bosnian Serb soldiers began a systematic massacre of Bosniak men and boys. More than 8,000 men and boys, aged between 12 and 60, were captured, separated from their wives and children, and then executed. The victims were buried in large graves, and Serbian troops tried to remove all traces of the crime. Women, children, and the elderly were also displaced, and many were forced to flee to the foothills of the Bosnian mountains in search of safety. The Srebrenica massacre was the result of a years-long systematic attempt to expel Bosnian Muslims from the area and change the ethnic composition of the region, and is generally recognized as genocide because it clearly demonstrates the perpetrator's intent to exterminate the Bosniak population. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia declared in 2001 that the massacre in Srebrenica was clearly genocide. Ratko Mladic, the Bosnian Serb general responsible for the massacre, was later convicted for his role in the massacre and other war crimes. The Srebrenica massacre had far-reaching repercussions for the region and the international community, as the United Nations and peacekeeping forces in the region failed to prevent or stop the massacre. International peacekeeping activities were called into question. Following the end of the war, the massacre became one of the main themes of international war crimes trials and helped to clarify the concept of genocide in modern warfare. Political and ethnic tensions are still high in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the massacre has left deep scars that affect not only the surviving victims and their families, but also the entire society of the country. Numerous graves have been opened. Memorials such as the Srebrenica Museum and the Memorial Center in Podokari have been established to commemorate the victims and ensure that such atrocities never happen again, and the Srebrenica massacre continues to remind the international community of the importance of early detection and prevention of war crimes. It makes clear that the protection of civilians and respect for human rights must be a top priority for all states and international organizations in times of crisis. The signing of the Dayton Agreement in December 1995 marked a decisive turning point in the history of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as it formally ended the devastating Bosnian War, which lasted from 1992 to 1995 and was marked by ethnic tensions between Bosnian Muslims, Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs, leading to massive loss of life and destruction, killing nearly 100,000 people and displacing millions more. The agreement was negotiated in Dayton, Ohio, USA, and was led by then U.S. Special Envoy Richard Holbrooke. The negotiations, involving representatives of Bosnia's three main ethnic groups, Bosnian Muslim President Alija Izetbegović, Croatian President Franjo Tudjman, and Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic, were one of the most complex and difficult peace negotiations because the ethnic groups were very suspicious and hostile towards each other after years of conflict and violence. The Dayton Agreement laid the foundations for the creation of a new federal state of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It divided the country into two main entities, the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, whose population was majority Bosniak and Croat, and Republika Srpska, whose population was majority Serb. These two entities were granted significant autonomy, while the central government of Bosnia and Herzegovina remained responsible for important issues such as foreign policy and defense. In addition, numerous institutions were created to ensure the federal character of the country and strike a balance between the different ethnic groups. Although the Dayton Agreement ended the war, it did not immediately achieve full inter-ethnic reconciliation, and many criticized it as inadequate because it reinforced ethnic division and built political structures on the basis of ethnicity. Critics accused the agreement of laying the foundations for long-term tensions as it reinforced the country's ethnic and political divisions. However, the agreement created the conditions for lasting peace and stabilized the country after devastating conflicts. Another problem with the agreement was the creation of a complex political structure with many competing institutions and federal and regional authorities. This complex bureaucracy often led to inefficient administration and made political cooperation difficult. The implementation of the Dayton Agreement was monitored by international organizations such as the EU and the UN, which provided support to the country in terms of peace restoration and economic development. In the years following the signing of the agreement, Bosnia and Herzegovina faced numerous challenges, including political instability, economic difficulties, and difficult integration of different ethnic groups. Nevertheless, the agreement enabled the country to regain full sovereignty and maintain its existence as an internationally recognized state. Another outcome of the agreement was the admission of Bosnia and Herzegovina to international organizations such as the United Nations and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. The Dayton Agreement not only ended the Bosnian War, but also created a framework for the political and social reorganization of the country. Despite the existing problems, it made long-term peace possible and represented an important step in the post-war history of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Following the end of the Bosnian War in 1995, Bosnia and Herzegovina needed comprehensive international assistance to help rebuild the country and create a stable, peaceful society. The war had left behind massive destruction, with cities and infrastructure badly damaged, thousands of people killed or injured, and millions displaced. Faced with these enormous challenges, the country needed help from the international community, both financially and in terms of peacekeeping. The international presence in Bosnia and Herzegovina was diverse and included various organizations and states, with the United Nations initially playing a central role in supporting the peace process and helping to restore order in the country. In 1995, the Office of the High Representative was established to monitor the implementation of the Dayton Agreement and ensure that the political and legal obligations of the agreement were fulfilled. The High Representative had broad powers to intervene in political matters, particularly where they jeopardized the stability of the country, and another important component of the international presence was the deployment of NATO-led peacekeeping forces. Initially, NATO's implementation force was deployed in 1995 to maintain a ceasefire and security in Bosnia. Later, the stabilization force was created to continue to support a peaceful environment and ensure that reconstruction continued uninterrupted, and these international forces played a crucial role in maintaining security and preventing the recurrence of violent conflict. The European Union has also played an important role in Bosnia's reconstruction. In the years following the war, the EU provided substantial financial assistance to promote economic recovery and rebuild the country's infrastructure, and was also heavily involved in the area of political stabilization, accompanying Bosnia and Herzegovina on its path towards future integration into European institutions. The aim was to make Bosnia a democratic and peaceful member of the international community. In addition, a large number of non-governmental organizations from around the world have been active in Bosnia, providing humanitarian assistance, medical support, educational programs, and psychosocial support to those traumatized by the war, as well as helping to integrate refugees and promote reconciliation and social cohesion among the country's various ethnic groups. The international presence has helped not only to rebuild physical and economic infrastructure, but also to promote reconciliation and create institutional structures to prevent future escalation of the conflict. This was particularly important as Bosnia and Herzegovina, as an ethnically diverse country, faced a number of challenges in building a stable government and society, and international actors supported the development of democratic institutions and helped reform the country's governance. Despite this extensive international support, Bosnia and Herzegovina continued to face various challenges. Political tensions between different ethnic groups, mainly Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs, hampered the implementation of the Dayton Agreement and the stabilization of the country, which remained dependent on external support to continue moving towards full reconciliation and stability. To summarize, after the Bosnian War, the international presence made a decisive contribution to the restoration of peace, security, and order in the country. International assistance and peacekeeping missions enabled Bosnia to overcome the serious consequences of the war and paved the way for reconstruction and a peaceful future. But the process is long and complex, and Bosnia continued to need the support of the international community to overcome its political and social challenges. Bosnia and Herzegovina's political structure remains a key element affecting both political stability and daily life in the country. After the Bosnian War and the signing of the Dayton Agreement in 1995, a complex political structure was established to bring together the country's ethnic groups, mainly Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs, and to help maintain peace by securing each group's political influence and rights within the state. However, this complex structure, initially designed as a way to prevent further ethnic conflict, has often proved to be an obstacle to the political development and stability of the country. Bosnia and Herzegovina consists of two autonomous entities, the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is predominantly populated by Bosniaks and Croats, and the Republika Srpska, which is predominantly populated by Serbs, and the Bečko district, which is a special administrative region and has its own administration due to its multicultural population. This federal structure was created to give the various ethnic groups a certain degree of independence and political power, but this has led to fragmentation in the country. Bosnia and Herzegovina has a three-member presidency, representing Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs respectively. Each of these members has wide-ranging powers, which leads to a number of problems, especially due to the policy of mutual blockade. When it comes to political decisions, it is often necessary to reach consensus, but since ethnic parties often represent different and often conflicting interests, this leads to stagnation, which hinders an effective government and constitutes one of the biggest obstacles to the country's political stability. Another obstacle is the electoral law, which is often described as ethnically oriented. Voters vote not only for political parties but also by ethnicity, which further fragments the electoral process and makes political cooperation between different ethnic groups difficult. The structure of parliament and government also reflects this ethnic division, which means that political decisions are often based on the interests of specific ethnic groups rather than the needs of the population as a whole. This system regularly leads to deadlocks without viable political solutions, as each ethnic group insists on its own interests and rights. Another problem is the veto culture prevalent in Bosnian politics, where each member of the presidency has the right to block decisions that do not represent the interests of their ethnic group. While this system was created to ensure that no ethnic group is disadvantaged in the political process, it means that consensus is often not reached, even on important national and international issues. The lack of a clear and effective government and frequent political deadlocks have not only hindered the country's development, but have also meant that Bosnia and Herzegovina has struggled to make progress in key areas such as the rule of law, the economy, and the fight against corruption. The Republic of Srpska has an independent government and is constantly striving for greater autonomy. Political voices in favor of secession from Bosnia and Herzegovina have also led to worrying nationalist tendencies that further threaten the stability of the country, while there is strong tension between Bosniaks and Croats in the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as each group seeks to strengthen its political position, often to the detriment of the other. These inter-ethnic tensions make it difficult for the government to act as a unified institution and advance reforms. Bosnia and Herzegovina has been striving to join the European Union for many years and was officially recognized as a candidate country in 2016, which represents an important step towards European integration. However, the EU integration process is complex and lengthy, as Bosnia and Herzegovina needs to implement a series of political, economic, and institutional reforms in order to fulfill the requirements of the Union. While the path to EU membership requires significant reforms in several areas, such as improving the rule of law, fighting corruption, promoting human rights and minority rights, and establishing a functioning, inclusive political system, ethnic tensions, and the complex political structure in the country pose major challenges, as different ethnic groups, Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs, often pursue different political and economic interests. These differences make it difficult to achieve rapid and effective progress in negotiations. The EU has repeatedly stressed that Bosnia and Herzegovina needs to take significant steps to meet the accession criteria, in particular with regard to the stability of democratic institutions and respect for human rights, including measures to improve the economy, create a functioning labor market, and promote regional cooperation. Bosnia today is in many ways still struggling with the consequences of the Bosnian War and political division. Despite progress in recent years, the country remains one of the poorest in Europe, with a growing economy heavily dependent on aid and support from international organizations. Unemployment and corruption remain major problems, especially among young people. In the political sphere, strong ethnic and national tensions continue to hamper progress, and rivalries between political leaders of different ethnic groups make it difficult to achieve national unity and pursue common political goals. The political system, originally introduced to prevent ethnic conflicts, in many cases leads to political gridlock and institutional stagnation. These challenges hinder the country's economic and social progress and make the path to EU membership more difficult, but Bosnia and Herzegovina remains a country with significant potential. It has a rich culture, a long history, and a geographical location that makes it an important partner in the Western Balkans region. The desire for European integration is widespread, and the majority of the population sees the EU as a positive force for future prosperity and stability. The country has also made great strides in the field of regional cooperation, especially in relation to its neighbors Croatia and Serbia. This is reflected in increased efforts towards economic cooperation, security, and diplomatic relations. However, the path to full EU membership remains a challenge, requiring time and comprehensive reforms. Bosnia and Herzegovina is in transition and faces many political, economic, and social challenges, but has the potential to become a stable democracy and an economically successful member of the European Union. The coming years will be decisive in determining how the country deals with these challenges and whether it can find its place in the European family.